Ariana Fuentes-Diaz's death could easily have been prevented. It wasn't an act of God or some freak accident. It wasn't even a random crime, the kind that inevitably occurs in a country as big as ours is. No, her death was the product of a deliberate policy. Our leadership class has decided to downplay the threat of MS-13. Why? Because Trump attacked MS-13. Therefore, in the demented zero-sum calculation of permanent Washington, MS-13 must be virtuous. The enemy of Donald Trump must be my friend. That's how they think. It all started almost exactly a year ago when the president said this.
So when the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals. And guess what? I always will.
Keep in mind, MS-13's motto is kill, rape, control. They routinely torture and murder high school students. They bring drugs across the border and into our neighborhoods. They're the deadliest criminal gang in America. And yet, once Trump attacked them, the left decided that worrying about MS-13 was a greater threat to our values than the gang itself. Anyone who criticized MS-13 was denounced as a racist, if not a tool of Putin. They said as much out loud, including on this show. The traditional Democratic Party, the one that represented blue-collar America, would have been baffled by this. Working-class people of all colors are always the biggest victims of crime. If you want to protect them, don't side with criminals. That was something that Democrats, including a young Joe Biden, once understood intuitively, but no longer. Today, criticizing MS-13 would mean asking questions about the party's orthodoxy on immigration. It would expose Nancy Pelosi's absurd lie that every single immigrant is impressive and must be allowed to stay in the country, no questions asked. Nobody on the left wants to talk about any of this, so instead they just defended MS-13.
He basically seems to assume that everybody is part of MS-13. Very strange to hear a president of the United States speak in such dehumanizing terms.
Is it appropriate for a president to ever call anyone an animal, even if they are sadistic gang members?
Yeah, I think that's something to watch out for. The history of political leaders dehumanizing opponents, even criminals, and using animal metaphors is a dangerous one. That is not something that we should accept from an American president.
I do think there's a serious problem with the president dehumanizing any group of people in the United States, even if they are hardened criminals.
Got that? Saying rude things about MS-13 is a, quote, serious problem. Unlike, say, abortion up to the moment of birth, which is liberation and not a problem at all. That's Nancy Pelosi's position. Pelosi considers late-term abortion as wholesome as a 4th of July picnic, but criticizes a Central American gang member with a face tattoo, and she will give you a long lecture about God.
We're all God's children. There's a spark of divinity in every person on earth. And so when the President of the United States says about undocumented immigrants, these aren't people, these are animals, you have to wonder, does he not believe in the spark of divinity, the dignity and worth of every person? Every day that you think you've seen it all, along comes another manifestation of why their policies are so inhumane.
That's today's lecture on Christianity from Nancy Pelosi. The media, of course, dutifully amplified Pelosi's message. She's their boss. That's their job. Vox.com produced an entire video designed to explain that actually MS-13 members are just like your kids.
When you think of the street gang MS-13, what do you see? Maybe something like this, or this. But what if I told you the typical MS-13 gang member in the U.S. actually looks like one of these young men on Facebook?
The MS-13 members that I've been following are working after-school jobs, they're living with their parents, they get around Long Island on bicycles.
There's no indication that we're seeing a bigger surge of MS-13 than we'd seen in the past.
When the revolution finally ends, when this era, this moment, whatever we're in right now, when it finally ends, that video you just saw from Vox.com will be worth watching, a period piece. We're going to look at that and say, it's hard to believe that that's real, but it is real. That kind of propaganda where powerful people are lying right to your face again and again and again. It happens a lot. And it would be pretty funny, actually, if the stakes were lower, but they're not low, they're high. The left defends MS-13 because they can't acknowledge a downside to the open borders they've given us. Once we start talking about all of this, who knows where it might end. So instead, they lecture us about dignity while high school kids get murdered. And for them, that's a small price to pay.